Good morning, everybody. I'm Karma Holmes, and I'm one of the co-chairs for this year's CBS. Thank you for joining us online today. I'm attending this CBS from Edmonton, and I wish to acknowledge the land on which I am speaking to you. This is Treaty 6 territory and a traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, the Saulteaux, the Niitsitapi, the Métis, and the Nakota Sioux peoples. Since we're on a virtual platform with staff, guests, and clients attending from across Canada, I'd also like to recognize the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. This capacity building seminar brings together associated staff involved in buildings engineering projects because we believe that sharing knowledge, expertise, lessons learned, and building relationships are key to developing a strong and cohesive team across the company and bringing the best solutions to our clients. We generally hold one or two of these seminars every year on practice areas within Associated. Today is unique, as typically our seminars are held for internal staff with a few locally invited clients. But this online platform in today's world allows us to bring together our clients and guests from across the country. Thank you all for joining us today and sharing this learning opportunity. In 2016, the last time our buildings team met at a capacity building seminar, our theme was net zero carbon, net zero energy, and net zero water. This is a vision that we still aspire to when working on projects with our clients. But this year, the theme of our capacity building seminar is resilience, how to plan buildings and communities with resilience in mind. In today's sessions, we will feature a keynote presentation from the City of Edmonton, and you will hear presentations from staff across Associated as well as guests. Topics include energy auditing, energy modeling, HVAC retrofits for COVID-19, mass timber and building prefabrication, and alternative energy. After each of the presentations, we'll have a question and answer period. I encourage you to ask questions. In this event platform, you'll note that there are several features on the right of the screen shown by tabs for chats, questions, polls, and participants. Please enter your questions in the questions tab. And if you like a question that's been posted, use the heart icon under the question to move it up on the priority list to make sure that our moderator reads those questions first to our presenters. The participant area allows you to see all the participants in the room. You can click on their names and have a private chat with participants. The chat tab is, in this session, happens to be public. We have several concurrent streams, which you see in the call to action boxes or tiles on the left of your screen and also in the virtual lobby. Abstracts are available from the navigation bar along the top in the virtual lobby. While we can't meet face-to-face, this online virtual platform allows us to form breakout rooms and network, believe it or not. We can virtually connect and see our colleagues from across Canada by video. During the breaks, I encourage you to take time to network with staff, clients, and guests using the event networking area. You can connect with colleagues by going to the networking area at the bottom of the virtual lobby page and searching and clicking on your colleague's name. An attendee how-to guide was emailed to you, and it's also available in the virtual lobby along the top in the navigation bar. Please take advantage of the networking space to connect and share your experiences with colleagues and clients. Now, before our formal sessions start, I would like to welcome Associated's President and CEO, Martin Jobke, to say a few words. Martin?
Thanks, Karma. Thanks, everyone, for joining us this morning from wherever you might be. For myself today, I'm working from my home office, which I think many of you are these days as well, with some of the more recent restrictions and limiting travel. I think it is incumbent upon us to, again, all work on staying safe and staying healthy. So for me today, I'm actually broadcasting from Delta, which is just the southern part of Vancouver. I'm also on the traditional lands of the Tawasin and Musqueam First Nation, so I want to recognize the First Peoples of the land that I'm coming to you from today, as well as to acknowledge and extend my appreciation to all the Indigenous peoples and the lands from which we all are on today. Associated Engineering has a long history of doing these CBSs, as Karma has said. This is something that we've done and actually found great value in over the years. And every year we try to do at least 2 capacity building sessions. And I think preferably we'd like to do them in person because, again, definitely I think we get a lot more out of it when we do get together and have the opportunity for those accidental collisions that happen during seminars and sessions. That being said, this platform does provide us the opportunity, a larger group to get together virtually. While it's not the same, I think it does also offer a lot of benefits. And again, most recently, we've had a lot of success in doing it on this platform. This year's co-chairs are Karma Holmes, Tom Scott, and Melissa Heinrich. So again, very much like to extend my appreciation to all the time and effort that's gone into putting this together. It does take a lot of time, does take a lot of effort, as well as all the speakers and presentations, moderators. Coordinating all those individuals is not a small feat. So again, thank you to the organizing committee. The theme of this year's building CBS is one that I'm very passionate about and does form sort of one of the cornerstones of our strategic plan, and that's about resilience. In 2018, our strategic plan, part of the vision was to create solutions for a healthy, resilient world. And I believe as engineers, planners, and technologists, architects, and scientists, we are uniquely positioned and have the ability to influence the design and build healthy and resilient structures, and in doing so, shape a better world for all of us to live and our future generations to share. Kalen, thank you in advance for making your time available. I know you're a busy person as well to give us our keynote address this morning. I think from what I've seen in terms of the presentations, we're starting off with a bang. And again, thanks again for making your time available. And all the participants, I would encourage you, as Karma said, to get involved in the chat sessions and the breakout rooms. It's a bit of maybe an experiment for some of us in terms of not having done this before, but I think once you start using the platform, you'll actually find it to be very intriguing and I think very insightful. So again, with that, I'm not going to take any more time of the day for you because it is a busy day. So again, thank you, Karma. Thank you, participants. And again, thank you, Kalen, for making your time available for the keynote session. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. So before we get officially started with Kalen's presentation, it is normal course of action that we start off our meeting with a safety moment. Today, I'd like to cover the importance of good hand hygiene and wearing face masks. Practicing good hand hygiene by cleaning hands at the right time and in the right way helps reduce the risk of infection and spreading infection to others. The best method that we know is washing with hot soapy water for a minimum of 20 seconds. But when that option is not available, it's recommended to use hand sanitizer. Using a hand sanitizer with at least 60% alcohol is recommended. But be aware that hand sanitizer is not effective when hands are greasy or dirty. Once applied, you must allow enough time for the sanitizer to fully dry. Hand sanitizer is highly flammable. There have been some cases of people actually getting burned due to arcing electricity. And definitely make sure the hand sanitizer is dry before smoking or doing anything near an open flame. And on the topic of masks, masks should certainly complement but not replace other preventative measures. Continue physical distancing and good hand hygiene, and stay home when you're sick, of course. Clean your hands before you put your mask on, before taking it off, and after you take it off. Inspect the mask, holding it by the ties or loops, and discard if it's damaged or dirty. Always tighten with ties or ear loops to reduce gapping. And keep your nose, mouth, and chin covered at all times. When you use disposable masks, remove it if it ever becomes wet, torn, or dirty, and dispose of it in a lined garbage bag. When you're using cloth reusable masks, store the used mask in a sealed bag until it can be washed in hot soapy water. And with that, now I would like to introduce you to today's keynote speaker, Ms. Kalen Anderson. Kalen is a registered professional planner, and she's a director of the City Plan in Edmonton's City Planning Branch, and also the director of Urban Analysis. Kalen leads a multidisciplinary team of professionals to develop and co-create planning strategies and evidence-based implementation initiatives. Collaborative decision-making and integrated thinking are at the heart of her practice. She is a passionate and committed city builder, who wants the best for the community that she serves. Kalen's work is founded on a broad understanding of complex and human physical systems. For those in the Edmonton region, you'll definitely recall the city plan was in the news this fall. It received 2 readings by City Council on September 16th, and it's currently undergoing regional review prior to a 3rd reading. Today, Kalen is going to talk to us about the City of Edmonton's plan for the future and its planning strategy. Her presentation is titled Edmonton City Plan, 1 Million More. The city plan is the blueprint for Edmonton's growth. It articulates the city's shared aspirations as it grows from 1 million people to 2 million people over the decades to come. I first heard Kalen speak about the city plan in January, and I was definitely inspired. Resiliency has been woven throughout the plan in many ways. There is consideration of how we will adapt to and mitigate the effects of climate change, the establishment of economic nodes in order to create jobs, developing districts where people can complete their daily needs all within 15 minutes of their house, addresses the need for housing for every member of our society, and also the plan defines the concept of a rebuildable city. I'd like to turn the virtual stage over to Kalen to tell us more about the City of Edmonton's long-term vision and how the city will steward change. Kalen, over to you.
Thanks so much, Karma. It's really a pleasure to be here with you guys this morning. I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully you can see it. Karma, does it look good? Can you see what
I don't quite see it yet, but...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you just maybe try sharing one more time.
Okay. How's that?
Yep, we got it.
Okay, awesome. As all of you will know, it's always an exciting adventure to be learning new technologies. I think all of us have become super literate and really fast learners when it comes to all of these different platforms. And yeah, we're going to leave. One thing I know for sure is that we're going to leave this pandemic with a lot more knowledge about how to communicate digitally and a lot more comfort with that. So thanks for letting me struggle along with this one. This looks like a really cool platform and something that I'll remember as I move forward in my work. So as Karma mentioned, really in a great introduction, Edmonton City Plan is on track to be adopted as Bylaw 20,000. City plans in Canada are, I think, really, really exciting opportunities for our communities of all sizes. But when it comes to big cities, our big cities, they become even more pressing, I guess I would say, in terms of getting the right ideas put forward at the right time and in the right ways. So this is a really interesting time in Canada. We are in Edmonton about literally 2 weeks away from third reading, which is the final approval of the city plan. But also on Friday, Ottawa just released its first full draft of their official plan. And I also know that Vancouver is working really, really hard right now to get their work going. So an interesting time across the Canadian landscape. I would also note that Calgary is doing work on their municipal development plan right now. And there are a few other communities who are kind of in process of getting things kicked off. I believe Winnipeg's also in the same situation. So all this to say, the landscape for Canadian city planning is bright and big right now. And if you're interested in finding out where things are at anywhere in the country, I'm pretty sure you can poke somebody in any local community and there will be stories to share. So I guess I'll kick off by saying that the city plan really emerges at an interesting time for our community and in our world. A lot, it goes without saying maybe, but I'm going to say it anyway, a lot has happened in 2020 and a lot more change we think has yet to come. We all know that the pandemic has had a significant impact on Edmonton. Not only the whole of Edmonton, so our whole community, but also in the city of Edmonton as a corporation. But our sights are still set on the strategic direction that our city council has set for us and the opportunity presented by the city plan to help meet those council goals. In this time, it would be really tempting to take a back to basics approach to meeting the needs of Edmontonians. And in fact, many cities probably are thinking along these lines. But in Edmonton, we are committed to moving forward with focus. This means that we're looking for solutions that allow the city to work within its available resources and continue to advance our strategic plans. The city plan is about putting people first. It's the blueprint for our corporation. It describes our long-term vision, and it outlines how we are going to steward change with our partners and our stakeholders as we leverage the strengths of our community, respond to current realities, and build an attractive city where existing and new residents will feel welcome and at home. So the city plan in a nutshell is an outcomes-based and dynamic document that was built with resilience to disruption in mind. And as such, it provides a critical focus for us as Edmonton recovers and reimagines its future in a changing landscape. Work to build the city plan is underway with our community for 2 years now, and this plan will guide administration's efforts for many decades to come. So we're really thinking a very long way out. It's important to note that this body of work is a change management initiative in and of itself, and it will require thoughtful transformation efforts within the city to identify the priorities that will have the most impact for our community. So in other words, this work matters, and with clear focus in times of uncertainty, it's never been more essential to apply that laser focus. Edmonton is and needs to continue to be an important part of the urban fabric of our nation and province while staying relevant in a global context. It needs to respond to the social, environmental, and economic challenges of the future and reimagine new responses going forward. 40 years ago, our city was half its current size and home to approximately 500,000 people. As has happened in the past, growth will continue, sometimes more rapidly and at other times more tempered. But today, we are 1 million people strong, and we're looking to double again to 2 million people and add 520,000 more jobs over the decades to come. Change will happen, as we know, some of it that we can predict and some that we absolutely cannot. And there's been no better example of the need to be agile, responsive, and imaginative in the face of disruption than what we're going through right now. To move forward with focus, we need to be bold, agile, brave, and smart. In addition to our growing city requiring new choices to make, we're also compelled to prepare a new city plan in response to Edmonton's legislative obligations under the Municipal Government Act, the City Transportation Act, the Highways Development and Protection Act, and the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Plan. Further, the city's existing MDP and Ways documents, which are our current strategic plans until Council adopts the city plan next month, they're over 10 years old, and a lot has changed over this last decade. The city plan offers our community the opportunity to comprehensively update these documents into one modernized and integrated public policy document. So the city plan is part of a larger strategic system at the City of Edmonton, and each plan is supporting and building off of one another to advance strategy right down to implementation and funding. In April of 2019, Edmonton City Council adopted a new strategic plan called Connect Edmonton, which sets the course for Edmonton's future. The 4 strategic goals of the Connect Edmonton strategic plan indicate where we're going to require transformational change in order to achieve our community vision. The goals will be achieved through the city plan using a combination of strategic actions, partnerships, and collaboration. So, taking direction from Council and their strategic plan, the guiding question that we used to develop the city plan was, what choices do we need to make to be a healthy, urban, and climate-resilient city of 2 million people that supports a prosperous region? As we come through the COVID-19 pandemic as a community, our new reality requires a new orientation to our work. We're going to need to make intelligent and sometimes difficult choices to respond to the challenges ahead. This means keeping our focus on the long-term outcomes of Connect Edmonton and the city plan while meeting the needs of today, and many of them are quite pressing, as you know. Our strategic plans will ground us in these uncertain times, allowing us to move forward with focus so that Edmonton can emerge strong and vibrant as a city. In this vein, it's important to note that the city plan does not stand alone, nor will it act alone. It's part of a larger family of documents and processes that, taken together, represent Edmonton's new strategic planning framework. Taking direction from Connect Edmonton, the city plan will be implemented through our corporate business planning processes, capital and operating budgets, ongoing performance measurement, and it will be supported by strategic initiatives, including our zoning bylaw renewal and other projects within the city. This means that the plan will impact existing and future planning work across all areas of our city. As a result, implementation of the city plan will become the ongoing work of our administration and will unfold as we move into the future. In addition to reflecting Council's vision, the city plan was also informed by a dynamic and flexible public engagement program. And the city plan is also a spatial plan, outlining physically how the city will support new growth opportunities at all different scales. The city plan was also built on solid methodology and metrics that can be measured over time to track our progress. And it also includes defining very clearly some big city moves for Edmonton that represent the areas of significant change that we'll need to make to shape our future city deliberately. It was also important to us as we went through the process of developing this plan that the city plan itself was clear, simple, easy to read, but this would be true whether it was through print, electronic media, or other digital platforms. And finally, the last thing that we really considered when we were setting up the philosophy for the plan is that we wanted it to be evergreen, meaning that instead of retiring it or replacing it entirely after 10 years, it can be continuously renewed and kept relevant while being implemented in alignment with Council's budget cycles. The collective and collaborative work to prepare the city plan represents the voices of Edmontonians. Through ongoing conversations, administration engaged with over 10,000 of our local citizens. We heard what was important, how we should transform as a community, what choices need to be made, and how we will respond to this change over time together. Concerted efforts were made to provide the broadest diversity of opportunity for participation in all of these processes, and a GBA Plus lens was applied. We connected with children, seniors, gender minorities, religious groups, newcomers, Indigenous peoples, business owners, advocacy groups, and more. From coffee chats to workshops, meetings with community groups and industry and stakeholders, surveys and drop-in sessions, the city plan was fueled by Edmontonians. People shared their voices to shape the city. An example of one of the many voices we heard from was a group of young men at the Abbotsfield Recreation Centre basketball night. It's called Nightball. This engagement session was designed to quite literally meet the participants where they were, and we used the Nightball game intermission as an opportunity to hear from Edmontonians that we might not normally hear from. These young men talked to us about everything from technology disruption and job security to the need for more frequent and connected transit as well as improved recreational opportunities. We heard that what makes Edmonton great for them is community connection, festivals, diversity, acceptance, access to employment, and affordable housing. In short, they felt that in Edmonton they did belong and they wanted the same opportunity for their kids. Intimate community conversations like this one are examples of GBA Plus analysis in action because they consider diverse perspectives and they explicitly seek to include a broader array of voices that might otherwise go unheard. In addition to integrating the voice of Edmontonians, the city plan is also supported by evidence-based research and a suite of technical studies. These studies provided foundational information to the direction outlined in the city plan, delving deep into complex areas of importance, such as mass transit, relative costing, climate vulnerability, market conditions, and greenhouse gas emissions. Together, findings from these studies were instrumental in understanding both the current conditions and future state that may emerge as we grow into a city of 2 million. We undertook 3 learning scenarios to test out some findings. None of these were potential options or concepts in and of themselves. The purpose was to empirically test findings on a lot of different dimensions in order to inform our recommendations. So based on these learnings, the technical studies that we commissioned, the public engagement and public consultation that we undertook, we developed a preferred scenario with supporting draft policy, and we brought that forward to our Urban Planning Committee in September of 2019. As administration comes to plan and invest in a more intentional and integrated way, Edmontonians can expect to achieve certain results and see certain results that align with what they shared with us during engagement. So I'm going to share a couple of the big punchlines with you here. At a population of 2 million, which is the proposed horizon for the city plan, here are some of the expected results that Edmonton can achieve by growing differently. By virtue of more compact development and an increasing emphasis on infill combined with growth management, Edmonton will avoid the need to expand by an additional 5,000 hectares of land outside of our current boundaries to accommodate 2 million. So put simply, we will not need to move further into our region to accommodate future growth. Further, more than 50% of our future housing starts will be accommodated via redevelopment. Our greenhouse gas emissions will be reduced by an estimated 6% by virtue of a more efficient transportation system and more compact urban form. The number of cycling, walking, and transit trips will increase by 50% over our current state. The fiscal performance of our city will be improved over business as usual growth patterns to the tune of about 8%. And finally, Edmonton will be able to successfully attract and retain an additional 1 million residents and accommodate 520,000 more jobs. To bring this to life on the ground, the city plan concept that weaves together the essential physical systems and networks that Edmonton will need in order to sustain and attract another 1 million people living within our current boundary is presented in our city plan concept. And this is what it looks like here. This is called Map 1. It's essentially the most important map in the city plan, and it depicts our physical pattern at 2 million. So I'll get into the systems and networks a little bit more in a few minutes. Before I do, I want to point out that a large part of the city plan is how we're going to intentionally choose to steward the things that are essential to our city. So not everything's about change. And also to really embedding our actions in reflecting who we are now. Recognizing what's important and choosing to gift those things to another generation is part of the responsibility that we all have. And we really focus on this concept as calling it the essential city. But equally important is recognizing what needs to change. What do we need to do as a community to respond to our changing environment in order to leave Edmonton in an even better place? So the way that we handled this tricky question in the city plan was by identifying 5 big city moves that are bold, transformational priorities that our city is going to need in order to both sustain and transform Edmonton over time. These big city moves are really an invitation to work together as a whole community to build a future city that is more inclusive and compassionate, rebuildable and green, and where we can catalyze and converge within a community of communities. The big city moves challenge all Edmontonians to make intentional choices in support of our future city, both for ourselves and for future generations. Each of the 5 big city moves is supported by targets that are ambitious, yet also achievable over the lifetime of the plan. The first big city move is that Edmonton becomes greener as we grow, which articulates our aspirations of becoming a more sustainable community. Targets in this area include planting 2 million more urban trees, achieving a local carbon budget of 135 megatons, and having 0 net GHGs per person by 2050. Through the pandemic, we've observed the important connections that Edmontonians have to their parks and open spaces, as well as the impact that reduced transportation had on GHG emissions around the world. A rebuildable city is about continuously reinvesting in and redeveloping our city to support more people in more places. Key targets in this area include welcoming 600,000 new residents into the redeveloping areas of our city and having 50% of net new dwelling units added over time through infill development within our city boundary. A rebuildable city is also about agility and continuous adaptation. One recent example was our ability over the last few months to rapidly and temporarily repurpose road rights-of-way for things like patios and shared use paths to support physical distancing through COVID. A community of communities is about creating a city where we all have what we need within reach of where we live or work. It's about equity and it's about accessibility. This means that we can more easily make trips by using non-auto modes like transit and active transportation. And with ongoing commitment, we can achieve a mode share of 50%. It also means that we can create 15-minute districts where people are able to easily complete their daily needs by walking, rolling, or cycling. For many people, living much more locally has become part of the new normal through the pandemic, and the value of having services and amenities close to home has never been more pressing for each of us as individuals. Being an inclusive and compassionate city is about ensuring safety for all, eliminating racism, addressing truth and reconciliation, and tackling poverty and social isolation. Key targets in this area include ensuring that nobody is in core housing need. It's about eliminating chronic and episodic homelessness in Edmonton. And finally, it's about ensuring that there's affordability in how people choose to live and move by keeping household expenses to 35% when it comes to housing and transportation combined. Part of Edmonton's pandemic response, especially during the summer months, and now through the winter months in a slightly different way, included creating temporary day shelters for people experiencing homelessness and an increased emphasis on affordability and social equity. As recovery advances, continued efforts in these areas will be absolutely critical. Finally, the last big city move is catalyzing Converge, which is really about attracting talent and investment while supporting the arts and our institutions through partnership. Edmonton needs to be an attractive place to an increasing diversity of people, jobs, and talent. Targets in this area include retaining 70% of our employment that we currently hold within the region, within the city of Edmonton itself. It's about creating an innovation corridor, which connects our academic and medical institutions with our city center and attracts another 50,000 jobs to that specific geographic area. And finally, that our network of nodes and corridors identified in the city plan attract and support 50% of all employment in Edmonton. This big city move is really about helping businesses thrive and survive. Over the past few months, looks like we just got our EMRB approval. Sorry if any of you saw that. That's really great. It means we really are going to public hearing on December 7th. This big city move is really about supporting our businesses, and we've done a lot of that through the pandemic, from micro grants to red tape reduction, and these kinds of efforts have never been more important. So to bring it all together, to bring these big city moves to life, the heart of the city plan is about planning for people, the people of Edmonton. Each of the chapters, the policy chapters in the city plan, represents the aspirations of Edmontonians and articulates what policy intentions and directions, when used in an integrated and intentional way, will help achieve a healthier, more urban and climate resilient city supportive of a prosperous region. So the policy chapters in the city plan are not based on subjects like transportation, parks and open space, urban design, infrastructure investment. Instead, they're grounded in the values of Edmontonians, and they tell a story about the kind of city that we want to achieve. I will just go off my script here for a moment and say that for professionals, including you and your colleagues and your clients, we understand that you might not want to read the policies in the city plan as kind of a story arc. So we've broken things down into Tableau spreadsheets, searchable dashboards, and a lot of other kind of easy tools so that you'll be able to zip right in and find what you need when it comes to mass transit or low impact development or whatever it might be. So the policy chapters of the city plan are as follows. I want to belong and contribute. I want to live in a place that feels like home. I want opportunities to thrive. I want access within my city. I want to preserve what matters most. And finally, I want to be able to create and innovate. So to bring the plan policies and land use concept to life on the ground, the city plan brings together three major systems: planning and design, mobility, and managing growth. These three systems reflect the complexity of our city and how city building works best when individual networks are co-considered and integrated. The planning and design system combines the district, nodes and corridors, green and blue, and non-residential opportunities networks. Taken together, these support distinctive, memorable, and functional places for Edmontonians to live, leisure, work, and invest. The city plan's nodes and corridors network concentrates density to enable development and redevelopment opportunities and create attractive, vibrant urban places. Nodes and corridors create logical areas of concentration within our districts, and they will support housing and employment growth that is well served by public transit. They're going to be places to be and places to gather. They are animated with people and activity, with an emphasis on design and beauty that creates a sense of place. The city plan has also identified 15 districts citywide, each of which will be served by at least one node or corridor and will include both residential and non-residential lands. Districts are diverse, accessible collections of neighborhoods that contain most of the services and amenities that Edmontonians are going to need and want to meet their daily needs. They are unique based on where they are and what they contain. Through a systems approach to planning and design, the district network serves to connect Edmontonians to a broad range of opportunities that enhance their ability to live locally because the places and spaces that they need are close at hand and easy to get to. A green and blue network sustains the community and provides places to recreate, celebrate, and recharge. It is integrated with our built environment through parks, waterways, water bodies, greenways, and urban trees. It traverses both urban and natural areas, and it provides habitat that connects well beyond its boundaries. Through the green and blue network, biodiversity is sustained and provides physical and mental benefits that we all enjoy and appreciate, and it's also good for the flora and fauna that surround us. Finally, this is the last network within the planning and design system. Our non-residential opportunities network seeks to expand and enhance areas for our non-residential development to ensure that we have a diverse and thriving economy in Edmonton. The network supports areas for business growth, which creates productive and desirable places that attract talent, create employment opportunities, and encourage ongoing investment. Non-residential areas will have robust and varied mobility access and will be connected to our mobility system very effectively within the region and in the city. Our next system in the city plan, our physical system, is our mobility network. And this system combines active transportation, mass transit, and our roadway and goods movements networks. Combined or taken together, these networks provide Edmontonians with an equitable, accessible, and efficient transportation system. So first off, the active transportation network creates critical connections using walking, rolling, and biking opportunities. It allows people to access amenities, daily needs, and recreational opportunities. It also contributes to our mode shift away from single occupancy vehicles. The transit network, our mass transit network, provides citywide, district, and regional connectivity using mass transit and local transit services, and it prioritizes accessible, reliable, and safe service. This is essential for the success of our nodes and corridors and for our city as a whole. The mass transit network does not prescribe the type of transit technology or the precise alignment of these routes, allowing for a larger body of planning, engineering, and public consultation to take place on these topics in the future. Our roadway and goods movement network will facilitate ongoing economic activity and development while providing access to businesses and employment. This network is critical to supporting our regional connection and our prosperity over time. And our very last system is about managing growth. This combines a new growth management framework with development pattern areas and a phasing and staging framework to ensure that we have a successful rollout over time and that we're able to manage community change deliberately. All of these systems have been co-considered and integrated into their development, and our policy alignment comes together so that the vision, principle, and goals of Edmonton's strategic plan can be materialized and realized on the ground. So our first key spatial pattern here that I'll draw your attention to is our development pattern areas. This is one of the key mechanisms that we are going to be using to manage our growth. It's expected that through redevelopment and neighborhood evolution, we will be able to accommodate 600,000 more people within the Anthony Henday boundary. So that's a pretty astonishing number when you think about it. It's like adding Saskatoon and a half to inside of the Anthony Henday in addition to the people who already live there. And what this development pattern areas also shows us is that there is going to be still significant growth occurring in our developing area as we build out to meet or exceed our greenfield density targets established by the region. And finally, moving further south, kind of in the lighter blue color that you can see on this map, that's our future growth area. And it will be thoughtfully and strategically open for development as our city grows. So taken together, this type of growth supported by strategic investment in our systems and networks will result in a significant increase in the number of high-density housing types that we see in our city over time. In order to plan for a population of 2 million, because we're at 1 million right now, we're going to need to phase our growth. And we have decided to do so in increments of 250,000 new residents. So if you can picture it, there's almost 4 mini city plans within the city plan. And what we've done is we've identified the areas that we anticipate where growth will happen and the intensity of that growth over each of those population thresholds. Maybe I'll pause here to say that we did take a bit of a non-traditional approach to the plan. Instead of choosing a year that we were going to plan towards, like 2060 or 2037 or something like that, and instead of doing a real straight line population projection for each of those years, we looked at the problem a little bit differently and we imagined our solutions in response to that reconceptualization. So by planning to grow from 1 to 2 million people and then to break it into 250,000 person increments, we are able to be a bit more dynamic and frankly resilient to the shocks and stresses that will no doubt hit our community over time. I know that all of our communities change, but here in Alberta, we really have a fairly, volatile economy, and that's just been the way it has been for about 50 or 60 years. We grow quickly, we grow slowly, and we have a lot of shocks to absorb. So by planning for population and jobs and then planning to accommodate that growth, instead of worrying about the year in which we project that something will happen, we're actually a lot more resilient over time. So each of these population horizons is identified in the city plan. I'm not going to go through all of them. Here's just for an example, the first one as we grow from 1 to 2 million. Similarly, we've prepared an activation approach for those 4 population horizons as well. And both the public and private sectors are going to have a really key role to play in terms of advancing that growth. The city itself can commit to activating or can commit to initiating 3 types of activation in our nodes and corridors to support intentional growth in all areas of our city, allowing us to prioritize the allocation of city resources through strategize, invest, and nurture actions. In particular, this is going to align with the investments that are required for our city systems and networks so that we can achieve the the city that Edmontonians want. So budget dollars are constrained, priorities need to be set, and we have a lot of systems and networks to support to enable thriving places, or places that we already have to thrive today, and future development and investment to occur in the future. So bringing it all together and keeping ourselves accountable to the big ideas in the city plan is going to require that we track our progress in terms of the transformational initiatives identified through the big city moves. And our associated strategic measures are going to be tracked with interim targets set, and they're going to be monitored and reported over time. This exercise will be done in a way that ensures that our work is intentionally adapted and prioritized as we reimagine our priorities over time, and taking into account the impact of COVID-19 and no doubt future disruptions that we will experience. So the work's not done. Our City Council will continue to weigh in on this through future conversations, and now that we'll have the large high-level targets, the stretch target set, the next bit of effort will be to identify the interim targets, which is really a tuning of the dial politically to decide how far and how fast we want to go on each of those dimensions. So wrapping up here, I'll leave us off by saying that activating the city plan is going to be the job of the entire city, not just city administration, council, or developers. We must all work together to create the kind of city that's attractive to 1 million more residents and that serves our current residents well as we grow. This is I think, and many think, a super exciting time for Edmonton as we focus on planning for the future of our city, aligning our priorities and work to ensure that our future city is greener, easier to get around in, and continues to welcome new businesses and residents. While the exact details of how our city grows will only be known over time, it's going to be a daily responsibility to provide the services and supports that we need to build towards the future together. And we're committed and dedicated to this. So in closing, I just would leave you with one final thought, which is that the city plan really is as much a plan for 1 million people today as it is for 2 million people and 520,000 more jobs in the future. It considers our past, present, and future. It's people-focused, evidence-based, integrated, measurable, and unified. To realize it will take some courage, ingenuity, and commitment. It's the action that we're going to be taking today, tomorrow, and decades from now that will shape our shared places and spaces, our city. The city plan is all about moving forward together with focus. So thank you very much for that, and I will sharing my screen and come on back to the group conversation.
Thank you so much, Kalen. That was great. We have got some questions posted while you were presenting, so we'll probably jump into those. We've got probably about 20 minutes for questions, so I think there's good time to have some good dialogue. So one of the first questions that was posted for you was, is there a plan for relocating people that are displaced by infill projects?
Not relocating people specifically, but we actually do have policy statement. I can't remember the wording right off the top of my head, that we have to consider what happens through gentrification. We have to consider the people who are living in places now and the affordability, the broad affordability and the range of affordability that each place should provide so that people are not displaced over time. But the idea certainly should never be to physically move any people. That's really not how city building works or planning works or frankly our society works. But the city plan really clearly includes policy around needing to take a very strong social equity perspective and recognizing that as communities change, we need to make provision to ensure that we're maintaining affordability across a broad spectrum.
Yeah, that's great. Another question that we received, what do you see are the priority infrastructure investments required to implement the city plan? Knowing that you're speaking to lots of engineers, kind of curious about any of the major priorities on the infrastructure side.
really good question. And I think that your team will be very, very involved. So because we're talking about doubling from 1 to 2 million people, we're essentially building a whole other Edmonton. So you already know what we put into this Edmonton. And imagine that we're putting another Edmonton into Edmonton. So things that I would highlight will include upsizing pipes. Certainly for infill development, we're going to need to rethink our infrastructure, very likely. Consider probably how we handle low impact development differently. Mass transit, so planning for mass transit is going to be a really big priority. Again, the plan is very technology agnostic. I don't know, well, none of us know really what the future will hold in terms of the technology. So planning and engineering for all of that mass transit, I think, will take different flavors over time. We're also growing still a lot into our new suburban areas, so that will include extension of existing services, pipes, roads, parks, all of the things that we need to build new communities. And we have some pretty important economic development areas, including the area right around the Edmonton International Airport, which can be kind of a business hub. And I think there's going to need to be some specific kinds of investments made there relative to the kinds of businesses that we'll be seeking to attract within the region, and then also in EETP in our north end. So I think I glossed over it, but everything probably that you guys work on as city builders will need to be reconceptualized. And the only thing I would say is that a lot of what you're doing now, you'll probably do. But then, as we know, there's going to be a lot of different things that we don't know in the future. I think there's so many dimensions to consider, but I really think the mobility space is probably going to be one of the biggest game changers. So hopefully smart people like you will be able to lean into that and help us figure out what to do as the technology changes.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, in the short term with this pandemic, it has been interesting to see how our transportation patterns and behavior have definitely changed, especially when it comes to mass transit. Meanwhile, in parallel, we have a lot of the LRT work underway. So I imagine the city looks at the pandemic as it's a short-term blip in the longer-term plan for transit.
Well, we don't know for sure. So I work with some really smart colleagues who do modeling for disruption. So we don't know yet. What if a percentage of the workforce never comes back to their office towers? What will that mean for our downtown core? What will that mean for permanent work from home? How will that impact our transportation commute patterns? It should come as no surprise. Our basic pattern has been before COVID, and I'm generalizing, but bear with me. Live in the suburbs, major commute into the employment centers, and then shed out at night. That could be totally different. So one thing about the city plan is that it can't be set in stone, and we need to all be humble enough to recognize that we do not know if this is just a blip or if this is the first of new changes to come that might be sort of structural. So I'm sure you guys are thinking about it.
Yeah, there's so much unknown. Definitely, absolutely, yes. Okay, we've got another question. It's probably maybe considered a technical question from the planning side. Again, we have a lot of engineers in the room, and there was a question just to clarify the terminology of nodes and corridors. Could you just elaborate a bit on what those terms mean?
Sure, and I sort of regret that we use those terms. Plainly speaking, we're talking about main streets and town centers. So we're talking about so there's a couple different hierarchies. We have major nodes and district nodes, and we have primary corridors and secondary. That really just refers to the intensity. So for an example of a primary corridor in Edmonton would be like Jasper Avenue or 124th Street or White Avenue, where a lot of redevelopment is going to happen. Premium real estate in terms of investment, attraction, a very desirable place for businesses and for housing to locate. And then we have some secondary corridors, which are more of the neighborhood scale. You might not travel across the city to go and visit one of these places, but you'll really love it if you have it in your neighborhood. And similarly on the nodes, nodes, we're really talking about I would call it mini town centers across Edmonton. Edmonton, one of the things about the way that we've grown is that we're a very polycentric city. We're very generally low density and quite dispersed over a big geography. And people do really live in parts of town, and they want to have an opportunity to go to basically their town center. So what we'll probably see as the key opportunity for that in the future decades is redeveloping major parcels like shopping malls that may be redundant or have lived past their useful life. We've already seen it. Perfect example is Bonnie Doon Shopping Center, which is Edmonton's second oldest mall and is now going to be having a new lease on life as a very mixed-use town center that will incorporate, of course, still some retail, but also pretty high-density living in alignment with LRT. So sorry about that, nodes and corridors. That is a regrettable decision that we use that terminology. I think people, my colleagues in the future will probably just name it something obvious like main streets and town centers.
Okay, no, that's great. We've got quite a few more questions now. So the next question is again somewhat related to infill. How will the City of Edmonton work with our neighbors to avoid undermining the infill initiatives? For example, perhaps a new single-family development just outside the city boundary may be perceived as more attractive than living in a higher density development. Again, that probably speaks to the change of mind that we'll all need as residents to be able to grow the community differently than what we have experienced in the past.
Mm-hmm. No, that's an excellent question. And so the purpose of the city plan and thinking this way isn't to sort of force people into lifestyle change. It's frankly based on noticing that Edmonton lacks a lot of diversity in terms of housing. So on the one dimension, there's not a lot of different opportunities in Edmonton right now in our region for anything other than high density towers or low density bungalows. That's basically how our city built for about 50 years. And now all of us, thanks to the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Plan, are all working from the same baseline in terms of our density expectations in our new suburbs. So Edmonton will meet, we've committed to meet ours, our neighbors have committed to meet theirs. And I don't think it's bad at all that there's a diversity of choice within the region. Big city regions operate that way. Ideally different parts of the wider community play different roles. And as long as we can think about the critical things that matter, like shared investment for shared benefit, good transportation accessibility between areas, how we provide amenities and services across boundaries, and we're all meeting our expectations, our regional expectations in terms of achieving regional density, it doesn't really need to be a competition. Frankly, I think that there's more than enough room for everyone, and people have different needs and preferences depending on just their personal perspective or the stage of life that they might be at. And hopefully not only within Edmonton can we provide for that wide range of choice, but I think that because we have the benefit of living in this very diverse region, that people can also make some key choices about what they want and where they want to live. So it really shouldn't be perceived as a competition for housing or a race to any bottom. The bottom's been eliminated now that we have an effective regional plan in place. And I think when you really think about Edmonton growing from 1 to 2 million, that's Edmonton. It's what we're talking about is attracting and retaining talent. And when we communicate to the world, to the nation and to the world, people don't notice City of Edmonton boundary, Beaumont, Sherwood Park, St. Albert. We're all kind of, the Edmonton region, just like the GTA is a region. So we would be better served to work together to really try to foster those job opportunities, attract the investment that we're going to need, and create the spaces and places for people to live comfortably together. And I think our region and our mayors have done just a phenomenal job over the last few years committing to that project, and with great heart. And foresight, because they know that the competition isn't with each other, it's with the world. Mid-sized cities are, there's a lot of them. And so why would, the question that we've asked ourselves is, why would people choose the most northern city on the entire continent of North America to make their home? And so we have to think about that, and we have to make it the best place. So we're not competing with each other. We're competing with the world.
That's a great way of looking at it. Yes. We've gotten a question. There was actually a congratulations in the chat line regarding the no parking minimum that the city recently implemented, and that came from one of our viewers from Vancouver.
Cool.
So there's a follow-up question. Can you confirm or speak to the city's no parking minimum considerations and implications? Did it come as a result of the plan, or had it been something in parallel that was being considered for a while?
That was work already underway, but there's no perfect planning universe where you get like your big policy set and then you have your secondary plans and then you have your regulatory change and then you change your building codes in a linear way. So things are often in flight at the same time, but the parking minimums thing started a couple of years ago. The idea started wrestling around about this a couple of years ago as we were thinking about how to remove barriers to development and how to reduce costs. And so one of the biggest city shapers and cost drivers, if you can believe it, you probably know it. Actually, this is probably not going to come as a surprise to you, was parking. And we realized that we'd had basically the same parking requirements in place since the 1970s, and we'd never studied it or asked why, or even analyzed, do we have the right information to be able to assess exactly how much parking would be required for a business? And furthermore, there's some more ideological questions to ask, which is why is this private market good being so specifically intervened upon by the public sector? Like there's so many, we don't tell people how many, bedrooms they need in their homes or how many windows on the side of their house necessarily, or how many pockets to put in their jeans. But we had lots of opinions about how many parking spaces to provide. And parking's very expensive, in terms of not only like if you're building in a podium or digging underground, we're talking like 60 to 90 grand a spot, but also the opportunity cost of surface level parking. So really, really expensive. So this conversation came about right at the time when we were developing the new city plan and understanding that we need to be able to be more dynamic. And we're also renewing our zoning bylaw with a very stated objective to reduce red tape, make things easier, and allow the market to decide wherever that could be feasible. So parking was our first kick at that, and to see what would happen there. And it was a tricky community conversation, to be sure, but at the end of the day, it's really interesting when kind of these forces come together. The private sector saying the same thing as the public sector is saying, residents are saying the same thing. And at the end of the day, what we did is we said, we're no longer, as a government, in the business of telling you how much parking to provide. You're the ones out there with your architects designing your buildings, finding your clients, and defining your market niche. If you believe that your customers would like to have parking provided, you are free to do so. Please provide that for them. If you want to separate parking from units and sell them separately and treat them as kind of interchangeable, because that's what your market needs, you do the same thing. If you want to take a risk and make a calculated risk and save the cost associated with building all of that parking, and hope that people will rely on transit or find their own solutions. Also, that's totally up to the market to decide. And I just couldn't be more proud of Edmonton leading this. I mean, we're one of the most car-centric cities in the country, and we're the ones who said, we did some analysis. It wasn't just cavalier. We said we have such an oversupply of parking that even if we remove minimums, there will be years or decades ahead where we still will have lots of capacity for that. So I'm pretty excited about it. And what we haven't done, I've heard from other kind of planners who are like, you didn't go far enough. You should have done parking maximums. And good for any cities who are ready. But, I'm proud of us. We took the first big step. Toronto hasn't been able to do it. Other places haven't been able to do it. So here we are, Edmonton. And we do have the luxury of the oversupply. So we have buffer.
Right.
But
yeah, good. Well, congratulations to your team in getting that through. I think it's obviously making the news across the country, so that's great.
Yeah.
There's a just about 10 minutes left. If you have 10 more minutes for us, we've got lots of questions that have many likes beside them. So
Okay.
one of the ones that's come up, if you can disclose for us, which items from the plan are the most controversial and why?
Oh, I definitely know which plan parts are most controversial.
Okay,
It's
great.
and it's not hard to disclose. It was really part of the public debate and public hearing. Growth management is the most controversial, and so this is the idea that we would open new suburban growth opportunities for suburban growth in our future growth areas strategically, and based on analysis of where we're at in terms of the population growth that we're accommodating, where we're at in terms of our infill targets, how the completion of our already developing neighborhoods is going. I think at this point we have 90 open development fronts in Edmonton, so that's 90 different fronts around our city that are developing communities, or like neighborhoods under development at some stage, which means that extending infrastructure, building schools, getting libraries, ensuring fire protection are literally stretching to the limit. So what we've said is we want to be able to have a new approach to completing areas in a reasonable timeline before we open up new lands for future expansion. The private sector invests a ton of money into opening up these new areas, and it's a big investment and big risk. And what we're saying too is that the public takes the risk too. Every new neighborhood requires not only all those services and amenities that I described, but we have to operate and maintain, and then over time we have to renew. So right now we're going through, Edmonton did not have a good practice of renewing its infrastructure for many years, and we faced a huge backlog at the end of the 90s after almost no investment, and now we're in for hundreds of millions of dollars kind of annually to renew. And that's an important, and it's not something that we shouldn't expect and plan for, but it was really kind of a wake-up call. Like, you can't just build a neighborhood once and then walk away and say, thank you very much. That's great. We have a new neighborhood. In fact, what you're committing to is a lifetime commitment. Not even lifetime, multi-generational commitment. It's more than our lifetimes. So growth management was highly controversial. Two councillors, or one specifically, voted against the plan because of that concept, because we were saying you can't just come forward and open up new lands simply because you own the holding. There has to be a strategic purpose, and we have to collaboratively work on what the drivers will be, both in terms of the population and the costs, and can we afford it, frankly. So that debate probably took 50% of the conversation. And it was kind of a bit of an inside baseball conversation between the development industry and city council. One thing that surprised me that didn't become controversial, which I think doesn't mean that it's not, it just means that it'll show up later in a different way, is all the infill that's being proposed. It's a lot of infill, and it's going to be a lot of community change. And what we're trying to say is no community ever is built and then can hold in time. This notion of a rebuildable city is a real thing, and communities change, and a single family house today might be a 3-bedroom apartment tomorrow, and in even further down the line it might be consolidated with other parcels and become a tower. That's literally what's going to happen in our city, and so we want to normalize that. It's a little surprised that wasn't talked about as much, but I've been working in the infill space in Edmonton for almost 15 years. I know that the conversation will continue.
Of course, yeah. Great. There is another question regarding greenhouse gas emissions. With the doubling of population, has there been any discussion about actually advocating or prescribing zero-emission buildings or district energy alternatives within the neighborhoods?
Yes, not in the city plan. Well, that's not true. In the city plan, we say broadly, we have policies like, we have the big targets. So live within the carbon budget, get to net zero per person. And then there are policies about carbon neutrality and how to Yeah, there's on a wide different number of dimensions we describe in policy what needs to occur from a high level in terms of meeting those challenges. But what the city plan does not do is it does not get into building code, zoning regulation, district energy. It says, explore technologies or ensure that we're doing things. So those next pieces will come down the line later. So, for example, one of the things that from a policy perspective that's happening now is the energy transition strategy for Edmonton is being updated. And there are, I should know, but I don't know, let's say 20 or 50 actions that are being recommended for us to take. And some of those do relate to changing code, changing expectations for the performance of buildings. This too will be, this will require a shift. It's a lot to take on in terms of change for our building and development industries. But other provinces seem to be a little bit further ahead, and the federal government also seems to be putting into place expectations for this. So in terms of describing exactly how buildings should perform or how energy should work, the city plan doesn't do it, but all of this work is going to keep coming out over time.
Okay.
And again, big topic of conversation with our engineers and our, politicians and our development community. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. We probably have got time for 2 more questions, and then we'll have to draw the session to a close. There has been a question regarding studying driverless transport and how that could impact mobility within the city, and any future transport plans, how this move towards driverless transportation will impact the city mobility.
Yeah, also a really good question. You guys are so smart. You're asking all the best questions. We do have a smart transportation action plan that was created a few years ago. And a few years ago for this kind of conversation and topic is like a decade ago almost, where we were talking about, the future of mobility. It was kind of like, what are we going to do about, autonomous vehicles and the premium that curbside space will become. And then there's that, and then there's also the drone technology that we're also thinking about. So what we're doing now, what I can say that we did for the city plan, and I had lots of conversations with my colleagues who did the transportation modeling, is they can't model technology that doesn't exist yet. They don't know the impacts of it and how user behavior. It's not just that the vehicle will travel with or without a driver. It's that our actual patterns of mobility kind of change with the technology. Like it's kind of like we stack it. So we might actually change how we live based on how we can get around. Theoretically, if you could put your non-driving kids that you feel safe doing so into an autonomous vehicle to get them somewhere to an activity, doesn't require parent commuting, that might really change also what happens on the parent side in terms of what they're doing. So all this to say is that my transportation engineering colleagues who've done the modeling have said, look, we get it. We can't model complete unknown scenarios. We can do we can test for vulnerabilities. We can keep adjusting. So we built the city plan based on what we understand today in terms of how we move. But we were really, really clear that we're definitely not committing to a technology. I anticipate, frankly, that like autonomous fleet will probably be a major part of our future, but this is not my area of expertise. Yeah. So we did that. And then we also, we recognize that things like micro-mobility, so small example, but the scooters, things like that are going to continue to emerge over time. And then frankly, mobility as a service might be something that's very disruptive, which is less about like car, bike, truck, whatever. And it's about you having, walking around in this is your mobility system now. You say, I'm going from here to here, and you'll be asked some questions. How much money do you want to spend? How much time do you have? Do you want to build in some active components so that you get some exercise? What's your game plan? And then mobility as a service is about finding that route or offering you different options. So this, I think, what you've asked is the most fun and wild and interesting question. And while climate change is going to be a disruption, technological change is going to be a disruption, demographic shifts across the world is going to be another thing that we face. I think the future of mobility for me, I'm just nerding out, is like the weirdest and funnest kind of thing. And our transportation systems shape our cities like they always have. Like cities have been just absolutely shaped by however people move. So when we were living based on walking, basically horse and cart, we had really small cities. We often had cities designed totally around ports when it was all about international trade that way. And now we're coming out of the generation that's been the auto city. And I don't know what the next city is going to be, but again, over to you guys to figure this stuff out. And I think that you're the company that will be one of the companies that will be like knocking on the door, like, oh my goodness, mobility as a service is a real thing. How are we going to like adjust our transportation system? So, yeah.
Excellent. No, it's so exciting. Definitely. We just, maybe in 30 seconds, if you're able to answer this one, it might be a yes or no question, but often the biggest barrier to transformation is approvals timing. Will the policy address will there be any policies that address streamlining approvals? For example, in the City of Vancouver, to attain rezoning, it takes at least 12 to 18 months, and then a development permit after another 2 years, and so on, and then building permit. If the plan has prescribed policy for use, form, and development, this seems like an opportunity to streamline.
So the plan doesn't have policy for use, form, and development. It's very outcomes-based. It's very different than other parts of the country. We actually do have a policy statement. I can't remember the wording off the top of my head, but it's basically continuously improve our regulatory environment to reduce barriers. So we're committing to speeding things up constantly and to removing any barriers that we see. Also, little plug for Edmonton. It does not take us 12 to 18 months to get a rezoning done. We're pretty fast. And we're getting better all the time. We're more in the neighborhood of, for simple, it's like 3. We've put a DP out in 40 days recently for a big industrial project. So we're serious about this. Like we're in it to win it. We want to reduce our regulatory barriers, speed up our timelines. And I think that the efficiencies that can be found also over time through some automation, will present new opportunities for us as well. So other city plans are, I agree with you, really prescriptive, I think. Just my opinionated planner speaking. Really prescriptive about like this many meters of this to that and this many meters of here to there, and that to me should be zoning bylaw stuff. Like that should not be in the aspirational long-term plan that says this is how we're growing. But what we have put in for sure is that we want, as a policy, we want to maintain affordability for Edmontonians. That's written in policy. And also that we want to continuously improve our regulatory landscape to reduce barriers and improve timelines. So I hope that makes you happy. Come to Edmonton. Do your work here.
That's a great way to end the session. Thank you so much, Kalen. Thank you for your time and great insight. And I think we've all enjoyed and learned a lot. And in recognition of your time that you've donated to us, we've put in a donation in your name to the Edmonton Food Bank. So we do really appreciate your time, and we'll draw this session to a close. But certainly, I encourage everybody to go out to the networking area. We have about a 15-minute break until the next session starts, maybe 13 minutes. So please take a few moments to go to the networking area, which is at the bottom of the screen when you go out to the virtual lobby. You can join a breakout room, you can invite someone to have a chat, or you can form your own public breakout room. And there are details in the attendee guide. There is a maximum with this software that only allows 17 people per room, but that doesn't mean you can't start your own. So we'll see you at session 2 starting at 9:30 Pacific and 10:30 here in Edmonton. So we'll see you there. Thanks again. Thanks, Kalen.
Thank you.